I still remember the exact moment my career seemed to end. The whole department was inside the glass conference room for the Monday meeting. Laptops were open. Coffee cups sat on the table. People were talking quietly while waiting for the meeting to start. Then my director stood up. Victor Hale cleared his throat. "Before we begin," he said, "there's been a change in leadership." The room went quiet. He looked directly at me. "Amara Bennett will no longer lead the compliance team. Effective immediately, she is being reassigned to a junior analyst role." For a moment, no one spoke. Someone dropped a pen. A few coworkers turned toward me in shock. I had led that team for 4 years. Our numbers were the best in the company. And yet, I had just been demoted. I slowly closed my laptop and looked at him. "Is there a reason for this decision?" I asked. Victor didn't answer right away. He shifted in his chair. "This decision comes from upper management," he said quickly. "We need stronger leadership moving forward." Stronger leadership. That didn't make sense. But something else bothered me more. Victor wasn't acting confident. He looked nervous. His fingers kept tapping the table like he was waiting for something bad to happen. At the time, I didn't understand why. But 2 days later, when the auditors walked into our office, everything finally started to make sense. After the meeting ended, people left the room quietly. No one knew what to say. That's how offices work. When someone suddenly loses their position, everyone keeps their distance. No one wants to get involved. I walked back to my desk slowly and sat down. My computer screen still showed the new job title next to my name. Junior Analyst. 10 years with the company. For years leading the compliance team. And now I was suddenly starting over. Still, something about the whole situation didn't feel right. Victor Hale hated public confrontation. Normally he would call someone into his office for a private meeting. But today he chose to demote me in front of everyone. That meant something. Either he wanted to make a statement, or he wanted someone watching. My phone buzzed. A message from my coworker Lucas. "Are you okay?" I typed back. "I'm fine." A moment later another message appeared. "Something strange happened before the meeting," he wrote. My fingers paused above the keyboard. "What do you mean?" Lucas replied. "I passed Victor's office earlier. He was arguing with someone on the phone." "About what?" There was a short pause. Then another message appeared. I only heard one thing clearly. My stomach tightened. "What did he say?" Lucas sent the message. "Just make sure Amara is off that project before they arrive." I stared at the screen. Before they arrive. That one sentence kept echoing in my mind. Who exactly was arriving? That night I stayed late at the office. Most people left around 6, but I had always been the type of person who finished work before going home. Even now, after the demotion, that habit didn't change. The building slowly became quiet. Cleaning carts rolled through the hallways. Outside the windows, the city lights reflected across the tall glass buildings. I opened the files from the project I used to lead. The Redwood Compliance Review. It had taken 6 months to complete. Dozens of reports. Hundreds of internal checks. It was the largest compliance project the company had done in years. And suddenly I had been removed from it. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. Victor's nervous expression kept replaying in my mind. Something wasn't right. Then I noticed something strange. One of the approval signatures looked different. Not completely wrong. Just rushed. Victor's name appeared at the bottom of several documents. But the handwriting wasn't exactly the same each time. I zoomed in closer. The letters didn't match the way he usually signed. It looked like someone copying his signature. A cold feeling ran down my spine. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was imagining things. Then my computer made a soft notification sound. A new calendar email had arrived. The subject line caught my attention immediately. Internal Audit Team, arrival scheduled. I opened the message. The audit team would arrive on Wednesday morning. 2 days from now. And suddenly Victor Hale's nervous behavior made perfect sense. Because when auditors arrive, someone in the building usually has something to hide. And somehow, I had just been pushed out of the way. The next morning, the office felt different. No one said it out loud, but the atmosphere had changed. Conversations stopped when managers walked past. People checked their emails more often than usual. It was the kind of quiet tension that spreads through a workplace when something serious is about to happen. I tried to focus on my new tasks, but my mind kept returning to the same question. Why had Victor rushed to remove me from the Redwood project? Around mid-morning I walked toward the copy room and passed by Victor's office. The door was slightly open. Inside, he was speaking on the phone again, pacing back and forth. I already handled it, he said in a low voice. She's not part of the project anymore. I slowed my steps without making noise. No, there won't be any problems, he continued quickly. The auditors will see exactly what they expect to see. The auditors. So he knew they were coming. I stepped away before he could notice me standing there. My thoughts raced as I returned to my desk. Victor hadn't looked relieved during the meeting yesterday. He looked like someone trying to stop something from happening. And if the auditors were arriving tomorrow, then whatever he was hiding had to be inside those project files. By Tuesday afternoon, rumors had already started spreading through the office. Someone said the audit team was coming from the company's headquarters. Another person claimed they were reviewing multiple departments. A few employees even joked nervously about cleaning their desks just in case. But the more I listened, the clearer one thing became. No one knew the real reason for the audit. I opened the Redwood project files again, carefully reviewing the reports I had written months earlier. Most of the work looked exactly the way I remembered it. But a few documents were different. Small changes. Subtle adjustments. Budget numbers had been shifted slightly. Approval dates had been moved forward by a few days. At first glance, nothing looked wrong. But if someone studied the reports closely, those details would raise questions. I leaned back in my chair, thinking. Victor had signed off on every one of those reports. If auditors discovered inconsistencies, his name would appear on every page. Maybe that explained his nervous behavior. Still, something didn't add up. If he was worried about the audit, why remove me from the project entirely? Then another thought crossed my mind. Maybe he didn't want me helping the auditors. Maybe he was afraid I might notice something he hoped everyone else would miss. Wednesday morning arrived with a strange silence in the office. Normally people greeted each other, joked about coffee, or complained about traffic. But that morning everyone seemed focused on their screens. At exactly 9 o'clock, the elevator doors opened and 3 unfamiliar people stepped out. 2 men and 1 woman. They walked confidently through the office carrying folders and tablets. Their expressions were calm but serious. Within minutes, word spread across the floor. The auditors had arrived. Victor came out of his office quickly and greeted them with a forced smile. I watched from my desk as he shook their hands and led them toward the conference room. For a moment, his eyes moved across the office. When they landed on me, he immediately looked away. That reaction told me everything. About an hour later, one of the auditors stepped out of the conference room. He was an older man with silver hair and a quiet expression. He walked slowly between the rows of desks, scanning nameplates. Then he stopped beside mine. Amara Bennett? He asked. Yes, I said. He nodded politely. My name is Adrian Patel. I'm leading the audit review. He paused for a moment before continuing. I believe you were previously in charge of the Redwood Compliance Project. I nodded again. Mr. Patel gave a small thoughtful smile. Good, he said quietly. I was hoping we could talk. Mr. Patel suggested we speak in one of the smaller meeting rooms near the windows. As we walked there, I noticed several coworkers watching quietly from their desks. Word about the audit had clearly spread. Inside the room, Mr. Patel placed a thin folder on the table and sat across from me. His calm expression made it hard to guess what he was thinking. I understand you led the Redwood Compliance Review until recently, he said. That's correct, I replied. And you were removed from the project 2 days ago? Yes. He nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already suspected. For clarity, he continued, were you given a reason for the reassignment? No. I was simply told leadership wanted a change. Mr. Patel made a short note on his tablet. Then he slid the folder toward me and opened it. Inside were printed copies of reports from the Redwood project. My reports. I recognized them immediately. These documents were submitted under Director Hale's approval, he said calmly. However, we noticed something unusual while reviewing them. He pointed to the signature at the bottom of one page. Do you remember when this approval was signed? I studied the page carefully. The date looked familiar, but something about it felt wrong. I don't think this was signed on that day, I said slowly. Mr. Patel looked up. That's what we were hoping you could confirm. After our meeting ended, I returned to my desk with a heavy feeling in my chest. Mr. Patel hadn't accused anyone directly, but his questions made one thing clear. Something inside the Redwood project reports wasn't right. I tried to focus on the spreadsheets assigned to my new role, but the numbers blurred together on the screen. My mind kept returning to the documents he had shown me. Later that afternoon, Lucas walked over and leaned against my desk. So the auditors talked to you? He asked quietly. Yes. What did they want? They asked about some approval dates in the Redwood reports. Lucas frowned. That's strange. I thought everything in that project was finished months ago. So did I. He lowered his voice even further. You know Victor has been locked in meetings with them all day, right? I looked toward the conference room. The door was closed, but I could hear faint voices through the wall. Lucas continued. He looks worse every time he walks out. Like someone slowly squeezing the air out of him. That image stayed in my mind long after Lucas left. If Victor had nothing to hide, the audit should have been routine. But instead of confidence, he looked like a man watching the clock run out. And somehow, my old reports were sitting at the center of the investigation. The following morning, Mr. Patel approached my desk again. This time he carried a thicker folder filled with documents. Do you have a few minutes? He asked. I followed him back to the same meeting room. Once we sat down, he opened the folder and spread several papers across the table. These are archived reports from 5 years ago, he explained. I studied them carefully. The formatting looked familiar. The structure of the analysis, even more so. Then I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. The writing style was mine. I had always organized compliance reports the same way, clear sections, numbered observations, and short conclusions. But the name listed at the top of these reports wasn't mine. It was Victor Hale. I've never seen these before, I said quietly. Mr. Patel nodded. We believe the original drafts may have come from another source. He slid one more document across the table. It was an internal memo referencing a training project from years ago. At the bottom of the page was a small note. Prepared with assistance from junior analyst, Amara Bennett. I stared at the paper, trying to remember. Then a memory slowly surfaced. 5 years earlier, I had helped a struggling intern complete a compliance study after hours. At the time, I thought it was just a small act of kindness. But now it looked like something much bigger had grown from that moment. And somehow, Victor Hale's career had grown with it. The memory came back slowly, like a photograph coming into focus. 5 years earlier, I had been working late on a compliance review when a nervous intern knocked on my office door. His name was Adrian Cole. He had just joined the company and was struggling with a complicated analysis report that no one else had time to explain. Most people in the office ignored interns. They came and went every few months. But something about his determination reminded me of my own early days in the company. So I stayed late with him. Night after night we sat in the empty office going through the project together. I showed him how to organize the data, how to structure the reports, how to present findings clearly. Eventually he finished the report. A few weeks later he transferred to another department. I assumed he simply moved on like many interns did. Now, sitting across from Mr. Patel, I realized that small moment might not have been as simple as I believed. Mr. Patel tapped one of the reports on the table. This document helped Director Hale secure his promotion that same year, he said. I looked closer. The analysis methods were identical to the ones I had shown Adrian. And the report looked almost identical to the one we worked on together. Except for one thing. Victor Hale's name appeared as the author. I left the meeting room feeling as if the ground beneath my feet had shifted. For years I believed Victor had earned his promotions through strong leadership and experience. But the documents Mr. Patel showed me suggested something very different. Later that afternoon I saw Victor walking quickly down the hallway toward the elevators. His shoulders were tense, and he avoided looking at anyone. Lucas noticed him too. Have you ever seen him like that? Lucas whispered. I shook my head. Victor had always carried himself with quiet authority. Even during stressful projects he never appeared shaken. But now he looked like someone who had lost control of the situation. Before stepping into the elevator, Victor turned slightly and looked across the office. For a brief moment his eyes met mine. There was something in that look I had never seen before. Fear. The elevator doors closed behind him, and the hallway became quiet again. Lucas leaned closer to me. "You know what people are saying now," he said. "What?" "They think the audit might expose something big." I looked down at the documents still open on my screen. If Victor really had taken credit for work that wasn't his, then the audit wasn't just reviewing reports. It was uncovering the story of how his career began. The next morning the auditors expanded their review. Instead of staying inside the conference room, they began walking through the office speaking to different employees. Their questions were polite but precise. By mid-morning, several managers looked uneasy. Mr. Patel approached my desk again shortly before lunch. "We located additional records from the year Director Hale was promoted," he said quietly. "What did they show?" I asked. He handed me a printed document. It was a performance summary from 5 years earlier. At the bottom of the page was a recommendation for Victor's promotion to director. The reason listed was clear. Outstanding leadership in the Redwood Compliance Training Project. I stared at the words. That was the exact project Adrian Cole and I had worked on together during those late nights. Mr. Patel folded his hands on the table. "There is something else," he said. "What?" He slid another paper toward me. This one was a personnel record. It showed the list of interns who had participated in that same training program. My eyes moved slowly down the page. Then I saw a name I hadn't thought about in years. Adrian Cole. And beside his name was a note that made my heart stop. Current position, external investor, Hale and Rowe Consulting Group. The intern I once helped, now owned part of the company. For a long moment, I simply stared at the paper. External investor? I repeated quietly. Mr. Patel nodded. Yes. Mr. Adrian Cole acquired a significant share in the company last year. The name brought back clearer memories now. Adrian had been quiet but determined. He asked thoughtful questions during those late evenings we spent reviewing data. I remembered how grateful he looked the night we finally finished the project. But I had never imagined that intern would one day become an investor in the same company. So he asked for the audit? I asked. Mr. Patel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he closed the folder slowly. Let's just say he had concerns about some historical records. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process everything. 5 years ago, I helped an intern complete a training project. That project later appeared under Victor Hale's name and helped him earn his promotion. Now the same intern had become an investor and requested an audit. The pieces were beginning to connect. But one question still bothered me. If Adrian suspected something, I asked, why didn't he contact me directly? Mr. Patel gave a small thoughtful smile. That's a good question. Then he stood up and gathered his papers. Perhaps you'll have the chance to ask him yourself. By Thursday afternoon, the office tension had become impossible to ignore. The auditors continued reviewing documents, moving between departments and requesting additional records. Managers who normally walked confidently through the halls now kept their doors closed. Victor Hale had not returned since the day before. Lucas stopped by my desk again near the end of the day. You noticed Victor hasn't come back, right? He said. I noticed. Human Resources has been in meetings with the auditors all morning. That didn't surprise me anymore. The investigation was clearly moving deeper. Still, something about the situation felt strange. If Victor's promotion had been built on work that wasn't his, the truth should have surfaced years ago. Why now? As I packed my bag to leave, Mr. Patel approached me once more. Miss Bennett, do you have a moment? We stepped into the hallway near the windows. The audit team will be concluding the document review tomorrow morning, he explained. And then? There will be a meeting with senior leadership. My stomach tightened slightly. What does that have to do with me? Mr. Patel looked at me carefully. Because the person who requested this audit asked for one additional thing. What's that? He paused before answering. He asked to meet you. That night I barely slept. My mind kept returning to the same memory. 5 years ago, sitting in the quiet office with a young intern who was struggling to complete a project. At the time it felt like a small moment. Just helping someone learn the job. But now it seemed that moment had grown into something much larger. The next morning I arrived at the office early. The building felt unusually quiet. Around 9 o'clock, Mr. Patel approached my desk again. The meeting will begin shortly, he said. I followed him toward the executive floor, a place most employees rarely visited. The hallway there was wider, the carpet softer, the windows taller. At the end of the corridor was a large conference room with polished wooden doors. Inside, several senior executives were already seated. One chair remained empty at the far end of the table. "Please have a seat," Mr. Patel said. I sat down, my hands resting quietly in front of me. A few minutes later the door opened again. A tall man in a dark suit walked into the room. For a moment I didn't recognize him. Then he smiled slightly. And suddenly I saw the same determined intern from years ago. Adrian Cole had returned. But this time, he wasn't an intern. He was the man who owned part of the company. Adrian Cole walked across the conference room with calm confidence. The young intern I remembered had grown into someone very different. His posture was steady, his voice controlled, and the executives at the table greeted him with quiet respect. But when his eyes met mine, his expression softened. "Amara," he said. For a moment I couldn't find the right words. 5 years earlier he had been the one asking questions while I explained spreadsheets and compliance procedures. Now he was the one sitting at the head of the table. "It's been a long time," I finally said. Adrian nodded. "Yes, it has." The room settled into silence as he took his seat. Mr. Patel closed the door behind him. "I asked for this meeting because there are things that need to be clarified," Adrian said calmly. He opened a folder and placed several documents on the table. "These are copies of the Redwood compliance reports that helped Director Hale receive his promotion." I recognized them immediately. Adrian continued speaking in the same steady voice. "When I reviewed the company's historical records after becoming an investor, I noticed something unusual about these documents." The executives leaned forward slightly. The analysis methods and report structure were identical to the training project I completed during my internship. He paused and looked at me again. "A project I completed with Amara's help." Adrian turned one of the documents so the executives could see it clearly. "This report carries Victor Hale's name as the author," he explained. However, when I compared it with my original training materials, I noticed several sections were almost identical. The executives exchanged quiet glances. Adrian continued calmly. "The training materials were prepared with Amara's assistance during my internship. She guided me through the analysis and reporting process." Mr. Patel stepped forward and placed another document on the table. "This is the archived version of the intern training report," he said. The two documents were placed side by side. Even without studying them closely, the similarities were obvious. One of the executives leaned back in his chair. "So you believe Director Hale used these materials as the basis for his own report?" he asked. Adrian nodded slowly. "That appears to be the case." The room fell silent again. I sat there quietly, trying to process what was happening. For years I had assumed Victor built his reputation through his own work. But now the evidence suggested something else. Adrian looked toward the empty chair beside him. "Director Hale was invited to attend this meeting," he said. Just then, the conference room door opened. Victor Hale stepped inside. Victor paused near the doorway when he saw everyone seated at the table. His confident posture from earlier days was gone. The calm authority he usually carried had been replaced by visible tension. "Please have a seat, Victor," one of the executives said. Victor walked slowly toward the empty chair. His eyes moved briefly across the room before settling on Adrian. "I understand there are questions regarding some historical reports," Victor said carefully. Adrian nodded. "Yes, there are." He slid the two documents across the table toward Victor. "These reports contain identical analysis structures and findings. One is from the Redwood training project completed during my internship. The other carries your name and was submitted as part of your promotion review." Victor studied the pages for a moment. His jaw tightened. "These are standard compliance formats," he replied. "Similar reports often share structures." Mr. Patel calmly placed a third document beside the others. "This is the original draft saved on the company server," he said. The file metadata clearly showed the earlier version had been created under my account. The room grew very quiet. Victor looked from the documents to me. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then Adrian folded his hands on the table. "The question before us," he said calmly, "is how my training report became the foundation of Victor Hale's promotion submission." The silence in the room stretched longer than anyone expected. Victor kept staring at the documents on the table. His fingers rested on the paper, but he didn't turn the pages. For years he had been the most confident person in any meeting room. Now he looked like someone carefully choosing every word before speaking. These reports were prepared during a very busy period for the department, Victor finally said. Many people contributed to the work. One of the executives leaned forward. Are you saying these reports were collaborative? Victor nodded quickly. Yes. Multiple analysts were involved. Adrian calmly slid another sheet across the table. This document shows the system logs from that period, he explained. The files were created under Amara's account, edited under her account, and finalized under her account. Victor didn't respond. Adrian continued, his voice steady. The only action under your account was the final submission to the promotion committee. I watched Victor closely. For the first time since I had known him, he seemed unsure of how to defend himself. One executive spoke quietly. Victor, did you present work prepared by another employee as your own? Victor looked around the table, then back at the documents. For a moment he didn't answer. And in that silence, the truth became harder and harder to hide. Victor finally leaned back in his chair and let out a slow breath. I never claimed the work was entirely mine, he said carefully. Managers often refine and submit reports prepared by their teams. Adrian listened quietly before replying. That explanation might make sense, he said, if the promotion review had mentioned any team involvement. He opened another file and placed it on the table. This is the statement you submitted with your promotion request. The document contained a single paragraph describing Victor's independent leadership in designing and executing the Redwood Compliance Training Framework. No team members were mentioned. Not even the intern who had worked on the project. Victor glanced at the page but said nothing. One of the executives folded his arms. So the work that earned her promotion may have been built almost entirely on Amara's analysis and training materials? Victor's eyes moved toward me again. For a brief moment, I saw frustration in his expression. But beneath that frustration was something else. Resignation. Adrian spoke again. Victor, the purpose of this meeting is not simply to revisit old reports. The audit team discovered additional changes in the Redwood compliance files. He paused before finishing the sentence. Changes that were made shortly before this week's audit began. Mr. Patel stepped forward and placed several new documents on the table. These files were modified 2 days ago, he said. The system records show the changes were made from Director Hale's workstation. Victor didn't reach for the papers. What kind of changes? One executive asked. Mr. Patel pointed to several highlighted sections. Approval dates were adjusted. Budget summaries were slightly modified. And several internal notes were removed from the archived reports. I recognized those notes immediately. They were the comments I had added during the original review process. Questions about numbers that didn't quite match. Concerns about missing financial details. Victor had erased them. Adrian looked directly at him. Those edits happened the same morning Amara was removed from the Redwood project. The connection was impossible to ignore. Victor had pushed me off the project, then returned to the files and changed them. The executives exchanged uneasy looks. One of them spoke quietly. Victor, were you attempting to alter historical records before the audit? Victor's hands rested heavily on the table. For a moment he said nothing. Then he looked up. And this time, there was no confidence left in his voice. Victor sat quietly for several seconds before finally speaking. I adjusted a few notes, he said slowly. Some of the earlier comments were unnecessary. I didn't want them to confuse the audit team. The explanation sounded weak even to my own ears. Mr. Patel remained calm. Those notes contained questions about inconsistencies in the financial data. Removing them would make the reports appear cleaner. Victor didn't reply. Adrian leaned forward slightly. Victor, when Amara led the Redwood project, she raised several concerns about irregular budget entries. Those concerns were never resolved. One of the executives turned toward Mr. Patel. Did the audit confirm those irregularities? Yes, Mr. Patel said. Several financial approvals linked to the project were processed without proper documentation. The room grew quiet again. Victor rubbed his temples as if trying to gather his thoughts. I was under pressure to complete that review quickly, he said. Sometimes decisions have to be made to move projects forward. Adrian's voice remained steady. Moving projects forward is one thing. Altering historical records is another. Victor looked around the table, realizing there was no simple explanation left. The evidence was already clear. After a long pause, one of the executives finally spoke. Victor Hale, based on the findings of this audit, we will need to begin a formal review of your conduct. The meeting ended shortly afterward. Victor was asked to remain behind with the executives and the audit team. As I stepped out into the hallway, the quiet carpeted corridor felt strangely calm compared to the tension inside the room. Adrian followed a few moments later. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he smiled slightly. I suppose this meeting turned out differently than either of us expected years ago. I nodded. When I helped you with that project, I never imagined it would lead to something like this. Adrian looked out the tall window at the city below. That project changed a lot for me, he said. It was the first time someone in the company actually took the time to teach me how things worked. I remembered those evenings clearly now. The empty office, the quiet conversations, the determination in his voice as he tried to understand the complicated data. You did the hard work, I said. I only helped a little. Adrian shook his head. You gave me confidence when I needed it most. He turned back toward me. When I reviewed the company's records after becoming an investor, I noticed something strange about Victor's reports. The structure looked exactly like the training project we completed. That was when he began asking questions. And eventually, those questions became an audit. Later that afternoon, Adrian invited me to join him in one of the smaller conference rooms on the executive floor. The room overlooked the entire downtown skyline. Sunlight reflected across the glass towers outside, making the city look almost peaceful. Adrian placed a folder on the table between us. The board will likely finalize their decision about Victor in the coming days, he said. But regardless of that outcome, there's another matter I wanted to discuss. I waited as he opened the folder. Inside were several documents describing a new compliance division the company planned to establish. The audit revealed several weaknesses in our internal review process, Adrian explained. We need a department built on transparency and careful analysis. I read through the proposal slowly. Then I noticed the line describing the leadership role for the division. Director of Compliance Integrity. My name appeared beside the position. I looked up in surprise. Adrian. I was just demoted this week. He smiled slightly. You were demoted by someone who was trying to protect his own mistakes. He paused before continuing. The board wants someone they can trust to rebuild the system. Then he added quietly, and I couldn't think of anyone better. I sat quietly for a moment, looking down at the documents in front of me. Only a few days earlier, I had been sitting in a crowded conference room while my director announced my demotion in front of everyone. At the time, it felt like the end of something I had spent years building. Now I was sitting on the executive floor, reading a proposal that would put me in charge of rebuilding the company's entire compliance system. The change felt almost unreal. I don't know what to say, I admitted. Adrian leaned back in his chair, calm as always. You don't have to say anything yet, he replied. But the board agrees on one thing. The audit showed us exactly what happens when people chase promotions instead of protecting the truth. He gestured toward the documents. This role isn't about titles or recognition. It's about making sure the system works the way it should. I thought about the long evenings from years ago when I had helped an intern learn how to structure a simple report. At the time it felt like a small act of kindness that no one would remember. But somehow that moment had traveled through years of work, promotions, and mistakes until it reached this room. Sometimes the smallest choices quietly shape the future. And sometimes the truth simply takes time to catch up with everyone.